A federal judge just made a historic ruling that could change everything about how ICE operates on the streets of America. In Minneapolis, protests have reached a boiling point, but it's not just about fighting for civil rights anymore. It's about the very laws that protect Americans from government overreach, laws that up until now have been ignored by federal authorities. Imagine this: ICE agents using pepper spray, tear gas, and even stun guns on peaceful protesters. It sounds outrageous, right? But here's the twist. Federal Judge Kate Mendez just stepped in, halting these tactics cold in their tracks. And the stakes couldn't be higher. The Fourth Amendment is under fire, and with this decision, the law may never be the same again. But what does this really mean for you? Why does it matter to every single American? Stick around, because this isn't just a victory for protesters. It could be the first domino in a chain of legal battles that redefine your rights. And trust me, the next move is already on the horizon. But this isn't just another court case. It's a pivotal moment in a larger battle. Judge Mendez's ruling is not an isolated incident. It's part of a pattern of escalating federal actions aimed at suppressing dissent. This is the third time ICE has been called out for excessive force in recent months. You might be asking, why now? Why has this surge, this crackdown, reached such intense levels in Minneapolis? And how is it that one judge's decision could make such a massive difference? Well, here's the kicker. The federal government has been using these aggressive tactics to control protests and silence opposition, but Mendez's ruling exposes the cracks in the system. It shows that when law enforcement crosses the line, the courts are still there to push back. And this could be just the beginning. If ICE can do this in one city, what's stopping them from expanding this nationwide? What happens when these tactics become normalized? This decision could set a precedent that reshapes the relationship between citizens and law enforcement for years to come. The question is, will it be enough to stop the surge, or will it escalate even further? So what exactly did Judge Mendez see that led her to this dramatic decision? Here's the key. The evidence was overwhelming. We're talking about chemical irritants, firearms pointed at peaceful protesters, and even a pregnant woman being thrown to the ground by ICE agents. These aren't isolated events. They're just the most shocking examples of a pattern of abuse that's been happening under the radar. One protester even described being detained without cause just because they were standing on the sidewalk recording what was happening. But the clincher? ICE didn't have any solid evidence to back up their actions. The government's defense was a witness who wasn't even on the ground, just someone summarizing secondhand accounts. Judge Mendez saw right through that. She demanded more than vague statements. She wanted proof, and ICE couldn't provide it. What does that tell you? The system isn't just broken, it's rigged. The government thought they could get away with this by brushing it under the rug, but Mendez just tore that rug away. And here's what no one's talking about. The Fourth Amendment isn't just a piece of paper, it's the foundation of your rights. Mendez made it clear that these violations won't go unpunished, but this isn't just about holding ICE accountable, it's about what happens next. This isn't just a legal win, it's a wake-up call. Judge Mendez's ruling is the first crack in the wall of unchecked federal power. Remember, this surge in tactics started under the Trump administration, and it's not over. The truth is, this isn't just happening in Minneapolis. This is part of a broader strategy to intimidate, control, and suppress dissent. And it's not the first time we've seen this kind of escalation. Think back to the 1960s. Civil rights activists faced similar oppressive tactics from law enforcement. Only back then, it was water hoses and police dogs. Today, it's pepper spray and stun guns. But the goal remains the same: silence opposition by any means necessary. What's worse, the government doesn't even try to hide it anymore. ICE agents are now actively targeting people who are exercising their constitutional rights. They're not just arresting criminals, they're targeting peaceful protesters, people who are simply watching from the sidelines or even just recording the events. This has become the new normal, and that should scare everyone. But here's the thing, it's not just about Minneapolis, it's about the future. The tactics that worked in one city could easily spread to others. So what happens when these moves become standard practice across the country, Now, let's talk about the next bombshell in Mendez's decision. ICE didn't just fail to justify their actions, they actively tried to cover them up. The The government's evidence was flimsy at best, with vague testimony from a summary witness who wasn't even present during the incidents. It was clear they didn't want to be held accountable. But Mendez wasn't buying it. This wasn't just a legal misstep. It was a catastrophic failure in transparency and accountability, and Mendez made sure to call it out. What does this tell us about the system? It's a glaring example of how institutions can manipulate the truth when they think no one is watching. The message is clear. When the government can't even prove their own case, there's something seriously wrong. Now let's put this in perspective. You can't go around violating people's rights and then expect to get away with it just because you have the power. The law doesn't bend to the whims of those in charge. Judge Mendez's decision is a clear rebuke of this abuse of power. And that shift, it changes everything. But here's why this ruling matters even more. It's not just about accountability for ICE. It's about a much bigger question. How do we let power operate without checks? And how far are we willing to let it go before we say enough? And this is where things get chaotic. While Mendez's ruling is a victory for civil rights, it's far from over. In fact, things are escalating fast. On one hand, you have the Department of Justice already firing back, launching investigations into state and local leaders in Minnesota. On the other hand, you've got ICE doubling down, refusing to back off their tactics. It's a game of high-stakes legal chess, and the players are going all in. Just days ago, President Trump floated the idea of deploying military troops through the Insurrection Act to crack down even harder on protests. Thankfully, that's on pause, at least for now. But the real danger? The momentum of a federal government that's willing to do whatever it takes to maintain control, even if it means ignoring the law. In the meantime, ICE is refusing to back down. Even after this ruling, they're still pushing for the right to use brutal tactics against people who are doing nothing more than exercising their constitutional rights. So what happens if this continues? What happens when these tactics become even more widespread? It's a spiral that's already begun, and it's only going to get worse unless the courts or the people put a stop to it. But here's where it hits home. This isn't just a battle for legal precedent. It's about real people, your neighbors, your community. These aren't just protesters in a distant city. These are everyday Americans who are being caught in the crossfire of a government willing to use force against anyone who challenges it. Think about it. Pregnant women being thrown to the ground by ICE agents, peaceful protesters being detained without reason, or people simply trying to film what's happening being threatened and arrested. This isn't some abstract issue. This is happening to people who look just like you and me. And the worst part, if this goes unchecked, it sets a dangerous precedent for everyone. Because today it's happening in Minneapolis. Tomorrow it could be in your city. This is about protecting basic rights. The right to protest, the right to speak out, the right to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures. These aren't just rights for the few, they're rights for everyone. If this feels familiar, say so in the comments. You're not alone in feeling like these actions are getting too close to home. This situation goes beyond just bad actions by a few rogue agents. It's a glaring example of how systems work to protect their own interests, even at the expense of citizens' rights. It's not just about bad apples. It's about a broken system that rewards abuse and prioritizes control over justice. Let's break it down. The surge in ICE presence was a political maneuver driven by a desire to intimidate and silence dissent. The administration knew it was pushing the boundaries, and they didn't care. They counted on the public's inaction, the media's distraction, and the court's delay to get away with it. But here's the problem. The system only works for the powerful when it isn't held accountable. And Mendez's ruling, it's a reminder that we still have the power to hold those in charge to account. But this kind of abuse doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens because the people in power know the system will protect them. They count on that protection. But Mendez's decision disrupts that protection. It exposes the gears of power that have been turning quietly in the background, and now they're under a microscope. What does this mean for you? It means the system isn't just broken, it's rigged. And only by holding those in power accountable can we begin to fix it. This is bigger than just one case. It's about dismantling the systems of control that have been silently eroding our rights. So what happens next? There are two possible paths ahead, and both of them are fraught with uncertainty. On one side, you have the potential for more legal victories. If Mendez's ruling stands, it could lead to even more challenges against ICE's tactics, and perhaps even force systemic reforms in how law enforcement operates across the country. This would be a major shift, not just in the law, but in how the government interacts with its citizens. But on the other hand, we're at a tipping point. The federal government could dig in its heels, pushing back even harder against these court rulings. If they escalate their efforts, we could see more direct confrontations between local and federal authorities and even more aggressive crackdowns on protests. The potential for nationwide unrest is very real, especially if ICE continues to operate with impunity. And here's the most unsettling thought. The next move is already in the works. The Trump administration, for all its setbacks, is not backing down. And with the Department of Justice investigating local officials in Minnesota, it's clear that this battle is far from over. It's a waiting game now, waiting to see if the courts will continue to push back or if the government will continue to push forward with its crackdown. What happens in the coming weeks will determine the trajectory of this fight. The question is, will this be the beginning of a broader movement for accountability or the spark that ignites even more repression? Here's the bottom line. Judge Mendez's ruling is more than just a temporary setback for ICE. It's a moment of reckoning. It's a reminder that when the government oversteps, there are still checks and balances in place. But that doesn't mean the fight is over. This battle is far from finished, and the stakes are only rising. The law is supposed to protect us. But in this case, it's been bent, twisted, and manipulated by those who think they're above it. Mendez's ruling, though, is a crack in that facade, showing that even the most powerful forces can be held accountable when the truth comes to light. What happens next could change the way we think about civil rights and government power. This isn't just about Minneapolis. It's about the future of our freedoms. The next step is already in motion. The real question is, where will we go from here? If you want to stay on top of this unfolding story, make sure to follow and subscribe. We'll keep digging deeper into the facts as they come out. This isn't just news, it's history in the making.